I was 28 the first time I really heard the sound of Malik's key in the door. Not just the metal scraping inside the lock, not just the soft click of the deadbolt turning, but the whole weight of it. The hesitation. The tiny pause between the first twist and the second. The way it used to sound like home, and then one day, it sounded like a stranger. Our apartment sat on the third floor of a tired old building on the east side of Charlotte, the kind of place with peeling paint in the stairwell and mailboxes that never quite shut. But it was ours. A narrow hallway led to 5 doors, all clustered together like secrets. At the far end was a flickering emergency light that painted everything in a weak red glow, like the building was trying to warn us about something long before I knew what it was. My door was 3C. Directly across from mine was 3B. 3B belonged to Sienna. Back then, I thought she was just the neighbor who always smelled like lavender and always looked like she had somewhere more important to be. She moved in 6 months after Malik and I signed the lease. The first time I saw her, she was carrying a box bigger than her whole upper body, arms shaking, curls pinned up under a silk scarf the color of burnt caramel. She laughed softly when she nearly dropped the box, and I remember thinking she had the kind of laugh that sounded practiced, like she knew people were listening. I offered to help her that day. She thanked me, said she appreciated it. She told me her name. I told her mine. She nodded slowly when I said it, like she was filing it away in some private cabinet in her mind. There was something in her eyes that I couldn't place. Not quite warmth. Not quite distance. Something in between, like recognition that never fully stepped forward. I brushed it off. There are a lot of things I brushed off back then. At the beginning, life with Malik felt like walking around with sunlight trapped under my skin. He was tall without being towering, with deep brown skin that looked painted in gold whenever morning light hit it through our thin curtains. He had this habit of rubbing his thumb across his bottom lip when he was thinking too hard, and I used to sit and watch him, imagining the future we would build. Kids maybe. A bigger place one day. New furniture that didn't creak when you sat down too fast. He worked at a small logistics company, the kind of job that meant early mornings, late nights, and phone calls that always started with someone else's panic. I worked in a beauty supply store off Independence Boulevard, selling edge control and wigs and serums to women who carried their exhaustion like a designer bag. I loved listening to them talk about their lives while I rang up their purchases. Their drama made mine feel like it was safely in the future, not yet written. At night, Malik and I watched whatever reality show was loud enough to drown out the neighbors and the pipes. Sometimes he slept on my chest, his breath warm and slow, and I would think, this is the man I will trust with everything. The first crack in that thought was small. Almost invisible. It started with lavender. Our apartment smelled like fried onions, hair grease, and the faint citrus of cheap cleaning products. It was familiar, humble, ours. But one evening, as Malik walked past me toward the bedroom, a different scent clung to him for just a second. Softer. Sweeter. A little floral, a little powdery. I knew that smell. I had smelled it in the hallway. In passing. On the other side of our wall. Sienna. He said he had bumped into her at the mailbox. He said she had dropped her keys and he picked them up. He said it like it was nothing, the same way someone might mention the weather or traffic. I nodded like it was nothing too. But something in my chest tucked that detail away. The next week, I noticed him lingering at the window a little longer whenever he heard footsteps on the stairs. I noticed how he smoothed his shirt down when he stepped out into the hallway. I noticed how, when we ran into Sienna together, he looked at her just a fraction of a second too long. Still, I told myself stories to calm the ache. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was projecting the stories I heard at work onto my own life. I told myself anything except the thing I already knew. One night, around midnight, I woke up thirsty. Malik's side of the bed was empty. The sheets still warm. The bathroom light off. The apartment quiet. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts. I padded barefoot to the living room, the floor cold under my toes. There was a sliver of light at the bottom of the front door, the kind you get when the hallway fixture is on. I heard a faint sound. Not voices. Just a soft rustle, the whisper of movement outside. I stood there for a moment, listening, my heart beat louder than whatever was happening on the other side. Then I heard it, a low, familiar laugh. Not Sienna's. Malik's. Soft, nervous, like he was trying not to wake anyone. I moved closer, placing my palm flat on the wood of the door, as if the apartment could tell me what he was doing. I heard another sound. Footsteps. A pause. Then that lavender scent seeped under the door like a ghost. I froze. Lavender on the wrong side of my threshold. I didn't open the door. I didn't ask questions. I stood there until the hallway quieted, until his key turned, until he stepped inside with the kind of care guilty people use. He told me he had gone downstairs for air. I told him I had been asleep. We both lied that night. The difference was that he knew he was lying. I pretended not to. Sometimes I think the hallway knew the whole story before I did. During the day, it looked like any other building corridor, dull beige walls, a scuffed gray runner rug, a single framed fire safety poster no one ever read. At night, though, it felt like a thin strip of stage where people stepped out of their real lives and into whatever secret they were acting in. I started paying attention to that stage. Little things at first. I noticed that Malik's workdays were suddenly longer on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I noticed that Sienna always seemed to come home on those same nights carrying fewer grocery bags than anyone could live on. I noticed how often her door was cracked open just enough to hear her TV and smell that lavender, wild and clean and too persistent. I noticed his shirts sometimes carried a faint trace of a perfume that I never sprayed on him. I tried to rationalize it all. I told myself that people who live close will inevitably share space, sense, timing. I told myself that trusting your man meant not turning every coincidence into evidence. Still, I started watching. From the peephole. From the window that looked out over the parking lot. From the little gap between the curtain and the wall, where the sun made a line on the floor that I used to love. One Saturday morning, I stood at the sink, rinsing out a wig cap from work, my hands moving on autopilot. The window over the sink framed the small back parking lot, where paint flaked off old cars and puddles turned into mirrors when it rained. I saw Malik first. He was leaning against the hood of his car, arms folded, head tilted down. He wasn't dressed for work. He was dressed like he wanted to be noticed, fresh white tee, clean sneakers, cologne I recognized as the one he reserved for date nights. Then I saw her. Sienna walked toward him holding a to-go coffee cup, her robe replaced by a soft gray dress that floated around her knees like smoke. Her hair was pulled back, exposing the lines of her neck, and she moved with that slow, cautious confidence I had noticed the first day we met. She handed him the cup. He took it. Their fingers brushed. Nothing dramatic happened. No kiss. No embrace. No dramatic music. But I felt something inside me crack anyway. Because intimacy doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hums in the minor key of how someone passes you a drink. Later, when I asked him how his morning had been, he said it was quiet. He left out that part. Days went by like that. Small scenes. Small omissions. The first time I really saw them alone together was on a Wednesday evening, when Malik told me he had to run down to his car to grab something he forgot. He said it casually, already halfway to the door. I was on the couch scrolling through my phone, the TV talking to itself. I counted the minutes without meaning to. 5. 10. 15. At 20, I stood up. I moved silently to the door, leaned close, and listened. The hallway was filled with a muffled sound, not loud enough to be a voice, not soft enough to be silence. I pressed my eye to the peephole and held my breath. The fisheye view warped the scene, but my heart snapped it into focus. Malik stood outside Sienna's door. Too close. Her door was open just enough for me to see the soft glow of her living room behind him. She leaned against the frame, bare feet on the hallway rug, her legs crossed at the ankle. She was laughing at something he had said. He rubbed his hand over the back of his neck, his nervous tick, the one I used to find endearing. He said something. I couldn't hear the words, only the tone. Soft. Half apologetic. Half flirting. Sienna looked over his shoulder, down the hall, like she was checking for witnesses. Then she stepped back, opened the door wider, and nodded toward the inside of her apartment. That nod was more intimate than any kiss. He glanced down the hall too. For a second, I thought he was going to look straight at my door. I pulled back from the peephole just in time. When I looked again, he was gone. The hallway was empty. I stared at that emptiness as if it could explain itself. My chest buzzed, my palms damp. I thought about opening my door, storming across, banging on hers, demanding an audience. Demanding an explanation. Demanding to be acknowledged as more than a fool. But something held me back. Fear, maybe. Or pride. Or the quiet, dangerous part of me that needed more than suspicion. I wanted the truth so undeniable that even my most generous lie couldn't cover it. So that night, I did something I wasn't proud of. I waited. Time became thick, stretched. I counted the hum of the refrigerator, the drip of the kitchen faucet, the distant sirens from the street. I sat on the floor with my back against the door, knees pulled up, arms wrapped tightly around myself. It was almost an hour before his key turned. The metal was louder this time. He stepped inside with an air of careful normality, like he had rehearsed. He kicked off his shoes in the same spot, dropped his keys in the same bowl, said he was sorry it took so long. He explained that he had run into someone in the stairwell who needed to talk, that work was stressing him out, that he just needed a minute. He said he hoped I didn't worry. I looked at him and heard all the things he didn't say. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I gave myself one more week. One more stretch of pretending. One more chance for him to choose me without being forced to. By the end of that week, the hallway made the choice for him. The night everything broke for real was a Thursday. The sky over Charlotte had been gray all day, that heavy kind of cloud that never quite commits to rain but smothers the sun anyway. I came home from work with the smell of hair products and other people's problems in my clothes, my feet aching from standing behind the counter. As I climbed the stairs, the building's air felt thicker than usual. The fluorescent light on the second floor buzzed louder, flickering like it was nervous. On the third floor, the emergency light at the end of the hall glowed a deeper red, like the whole corridor was holding its breath. My apartment door felt colder than it should when I touched it. Inside, the place was dim. The curtains were half open, letting in a muted light that made everything look flatter, less alive. Malik's shoes were gone. His jacket wasn't on the hook. His favorite cap was missing from the little dish near the door. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts. There was a silence to the room that made me feel like I had walked in on the middle of a lie. Then I saw it. His work bag, leaning against the couch. If he had gone out, he never went without it. Not lately. Not when he used it as an excuse for staying late and leaving early. A knot formed in my gut. I kicked off my shoes and stood in the middle of the living room, listening to a quiet that was too clean, too deliberate, the kind of quiet that only exists when someone leaves quickly and closes the door carefully behind them. Something told me to move. I walked to the front door and pressed my ear against it. At first, I heard nothing. Then the faint murmur of a TV from down the hall. Then a sound that was too soft to be words but too rhythmic to be random. And then that scent. Lavender. So strong it felt like it seeped through the wood into my skin. It wrapped around me, taunting, familiar, intimate in a way it had no right to be. My heart answered with a drumbeat so loud I was sure someone would open their door and ask me to quiet down. I slid the chain off the door with shaking fingers. I opened it just a crack, wide enough to see the hallway. The corridor was empty. Sienna's door, though, was not fully closed. It was almost shut. Almost. A soft wedge of warm light spilled out from the bottom, touching the hallway rug like a secret trying to escape. I stepped out quietly, pulling my door almost closed behind me. My bare feet sank into the thin carpet. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Sienna's door was just a few steps away. I remembered helping her move in, how she had smiled with tired eyes and thanked me. She had said she didn't have much family around. I had told her I understood. We shared a look that day, and I thought it was sisterly. Now, that same door looked like a threat. I moved closer. With each step, the lavender grew stronger, thicker, laced with something else. Heat. Skin. The stale air of people too close for too long in a sealed room. I heard him then. Not his words. Just the sound of breath. His breath. I knew Malik's breathing better than I knew my own. I had fallen asleep to it, comforted myself with it, used it as proof that I wasn't alone. Here it was, spilling through someone else's doorway. My hand lifted before I could stop it. I pressed my fingers against the door. It moved. Not much, just barely, but enough to show me a sliver of inside. Just enough. The scene smeared sideways through the narrow gap, but my mind sharpened it with brutal clarity. Malik's shirt on the back of a chair. Sienna's robe draped over the couch arm. 2 glasses on the coffee table, one with lipstick smeared along the rim. Their silhouettes closer than anyone should be when they aren't you and your man. I didn't need to see more. The evidence wasn't a single image, it was every moment that led to this one folding in on itself. I pulled my hand back like the door had burned me. I stood there, heart racing, ears roaring, and finally understood that pretending was a luxury I could no longer afford. For a second, I thought about pushing the door open fully. About stepping inside and letting the shock on their faces be my justice. Instead, I turned away. I walked back to my own apartment on legs that barely felt attached. Inside, my body moved mechanically. I grabbed my keys, my phone, my wallet. I didn't take a jacket. I didn't take anything that felt like it tied me to this space. I locked the door behind me and left without leaving a note. My feet carried me to my car like they had decided for me. I drove. I didn't remember starting the engine or pulling out of the lot. I didn't remember turning left instead of right. All I remember is that when my brain finally caught up to my body, I was parked outside my mother's house, hands clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that my fingers ached. The porch light was on. She opened the door before I could knock, as if she had been waiting just on the other side, listening for me. She took one look at my face and knew. Not the details. But that something had broken beyond easy repair. She reached for me, wrapped her arms around me, held me like she used to when I scraped my knees as a little girl. I let myself fold into her, sobs tearing out of me until my chest hurt. Between gasps, I told her enough. I told her that Malik wasn't where he said he would be. I told her about Sienna. I told her about the hallway and the door and the lavender that wouldn't leave my skin. My mother's face changed in a way I had never seen. Not just anger. Not just sadness. A kind of fear that came from somewhere deep. She sat me down at the kitchen table, her fingers trembling as she poured me water I couldn't drink. Then she said there was something she needed to tell me. Her voice dropped, and the air in the kitchen thickened. She said it was about the neighbor. She said it was about my father. She said it was about a secret she had kept for longer than my whole life. And that was the moment I realized my heartbreak was not the biggest twist in my story. I always thought the worst part of betrayal was the moment you realize you were the last to know. I was wrong. The worst part is learning that your entire life was built around a missing piece no one told you about. My mother sat across from me at the worn wooden table where I had done homework, braided my doll's hair, and eaten Sunday dinners. The overhead light cast a warm glow on her face, but it didn't soften the lines of guilt cutting into her expression. She took a breath and told me about a time before me. Before Malik. Before our little third-floor apartment. She told me about a man she had loved once, when she was young enough to believe love alone could keep someone. He was charming and unreliable in equal measure, a mix that women in my family always found dangerously appealing. He came into her life in quick bursts, full of promises and grand talk. He left just as quickly, always with an excuse that sounded almost reasonable. He had a girlfriend, she said. A serious one. The kind of woman he brought around his family. The kind he called his future. My mother had been the other woman without fully admitting it to herself. One night, after a fight with that girlfriend, he had shown up at my mother's door. Their history had always been messy, tangled up in unfinished sentences and unresolved emotions. That night, they became more tangled in a way that carried consequences. Months later, my mother realized she was pregnant. She tried to tell him. He had already moved on. He was back with the other woman, playing dutiful partner, planning a life. When my mother finally reached him, he reacted with panic, denial, then anger. He told her he couldn't do this, that she had to understand, that he was already building a life with someone else. He told her he was sorry. He said he would figure something out. He never did. My mother carried me alone. She decided not to chase a man who had already chosen another life. She planned to move on. Then, just months after I was born, she heard that his other woman had left him. Not because of my mother. Because she herself had found out she was pregnant too. That other woman left the city, taking her baby and her pride with her. My mother tucked the story away as one more wound she refused to touch. Time passed. She raised me. She worked. She survived. She dated other men, but that old wound hardened into something she refused to examine. Years later, she heard through mutual acquaintances that the man had died suddenly. A car accident. No closure. No explanations. Just another borrowed man gone for good. She never sought out the other woman. Never looked for the baby. Never tried to piece together what kind of family had been broken into parts. She thought burying it was the same as healing. But secrets don't die just because you refuse to visit their grave. They sit in the dark, gathering power, waiting for the worst possible moment to surface. My mother looked at me with eyes full of apology and sorrow and said that she had recognized something the first day she met Sienna in our hallway. It wasn't her perfume or her voice. It was her face. A face that reminded her of a younger version of the woman that man had chosen over her. She had seen that particular tilt of the chin, that particular set of the eyes, years ago in photographs she wasn't supposed to see. When I told her I had a new neighbor named Sienna, she had felt her stomach drop. When she came to help me move one weekend and saw Sienna in person for the first time, carrying a box up the stairs, my mother said she almost dropped the dish she was holding. She saw the resemblance immediately. Not to herself. Not to me. To him. To the man who had left them both. Her worst suspicion crystallized in that hallway. Sienna was not just my neighbor. She was the other daughter. The one from the woman he chose. The half-sister I never knew existed. My mother had gone home that night and sat with that knowledge. She told herself she might be wrong. She told herself she was being dramatic. She told herself not to drag me into pain from a lifetime ago. So she stayed silent. She watched from a distance as I mentioned small things about Sienna over the following months. The lavender smell. The quiet smile. The way she always seemed like she knew more than she said. My mother wondered how to tell me. She waited for the right moment. She waited too long. Now, here I was at her kitchen table, heart shattered for one reason, only to learn it had an even larger crack running down the middle from something older, something I never saw. I stared at her, trying to fit all these new pieces into the puzzle of my life. Malik cheating on me with our neighbor was a wound that felt immediate, freshly bleeding. Discovering that neighbor was actually my half-sister turned that wound into something else entirely. I pictured them in that apartment, the glasses on the table, the robe on the couch, and realized the betrayal cut deeper than romance. My man had stepped out on me with my own blood. He did not know it. She did not know it either, not completely, not consciously. But my mother and I knew now. And once known, that kind of truth cannot be unknown. My head spun. I asked my mother why she had waited. She said she had been afraid. Afraid I would hate her. Afraid I would go searching for a man who had already abandoned us once, even from beyond the grave. Afraid that acknowledging Sienna as my sister would mean confronting all the years we spent without each other. She admitted that part of her resented the idea of this woman, this daughter, who had been chosen in a way she hadn't. Hearing that made my chest tighten. Because in this tangled story, everyone held a piece of pain and resentment that had nowhere to go. Later that night, after I cried until my eyes swelled and my throat burned, I drove back to the apartment. The hallway looked different. The carpet was the same, the walls the same, the emergency light at the end still glowed red. But now I saw two doors, not just mine and someone else's. 3C. 3B. Two daughters of the same man, separated by drywall and a secret. I stood between them like some cruel joke the universe had written without my consent. I didn't knock on Sienna's door. I didn't open my own. I leaned my back against the wall and slid down until I was sitting on the floor, knees bent, head resting in my hands. After a while, Malik stepped out of Sienna's apartment. His eyes widened when he saw me sitting there. He looked wrecked. Hair messy, shirt wrinkled, guilt written across every tense line of his body. He opened his mouth to speak. He said he could explain. He said it was a mistake. He said he had been confused, distant, feeling something off between us that he could not name. He said Sienna had been there, listening, understanding, offering comfort. He said what happened between them was wrong. He said he wanted to fix things. He reached out a hand toward me. I looked at that hand, the same hand that had held mine through job losses and birthdays and lazy Sunday mornings. I thought about all the times I had believed that love alone would keep us safe. I took a slow breath. Then I told him what my mother had told me. Not the whole history, not every detail, just enough. I told him who Sienna really was to me. To us. I watched the realization crawl across his face like a shadow. His shoulders slumped. His hand dropped. He stepped back like the hallway itself had pushed him. He said he had no idea. I believed him. It didn't matter. Some truths are so heavy that it doesn't matter who knew when. The damage is the same. I stood up, walked past him, and into my apartment. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, like I was laying a flower on a grave. In the days that followed, everything unraveled quickly. I ended things with Malik. Not in a dramatic screaming match. Not in a scene the neighbors would talk about later. In a quiet conversation where I told him that even if the betrayal had only been romantic, it would have been enough. But now, it carried the weight of blood I never knew I shared. He cried. I cried. We both knew that whatever future we had imagined together had been built on a fault line that had finally split open. He moved out, tension hanging in the air like humidity. I saw Sienna in the hallway once during that time. She looked at me with eyes full of guilt and confusion. She tried to speak, but her voice caught. She said she was sorry. She said she never meant to hurt me. She said she hadn't known. I believed her too. It did not matter either. The hurt had already settled in. Soon after, she moved out as well. One morning, I opened my door to find her standing there with a box in her arms, just like the day she had first arrived. We stood in that narrow strip of carpet between our doors, the space where so much had happened and nothing had truly been said. She told me she had found some old papers among her mother's things, hints about a man from Charlotte who had once been in their life. She said she had come to this building not by chance, but chasing a feeling she couldn't quite name. She said she thought maybe this city held something she had been missing. I thought about telling her everything. About saying the words half-sister out loud. About offering connection in the wreckage. Instead, I looked at her and felt a wave of exhaustion so deep I could barely stand. I told her I wished her peace. She nodded, tears collecting at the corners of her eyes. She walked away with her box. The scent of lavender followed her down the stairs, fading with each step. I didn't try to stop her. Some reunions are not meant to happen on the heels of fresh destruction. Maybe one day, when the sting lessens, when the edges soften, I will reach out. I will sit across from her at some quiet cafe and tell her the whole story, from the man who divided his love between women to the daughters who grew up under the long shadows of choices they never made. For now, I live with the knowledge that the woman my partner cheated with was my own blood. And that my mother's silence stole years of understanding from both of us. People ask if I regret ever moving into that apartment. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I wish I had lived anywhere else, on any other floor, with any other neighbor. But other times, I think about what knowing the truth has done for me. I no longer romanticize secrecy. I no longer accept half answers. I no longer ignore my intuition when it whispers instead of screams. The hallway taught me that. The lavender taught me that. My own story taught me that. Now, when I lock the door to my new place, in a different building with thicker walls and fewer ghosts, I breathe in the smell of whatever candle I have burning and remind myself that I get to decide what stories enter here. I still hear Malik's laughter sometimes in my mind, still imagine Sienna's smile in my peripheral vision, still feel the weight of my mother's confession in my chest. They are all part of me now. I am the woman whose partner cheated with the woman next door. I am the woman who learned that woman was her sister. I am the woman who lost a relationship and gained a truth she never asked for. And somewhere inside that mess, I am also the woman who survived it.